Landing at the Palma de Mallorca airport, two lads from Bolton have arrived to seek the three things they desire, and those being sun, sex and non-stop dancing. The lads are called Dougie and Eric. They take local transport to reach the Palma Nova resort. They witness some drunken behavior from some of the other holiday makers. One of them was a Geordie with a beer belly cheekily harassing the woman at the reception, and his wife kept cursing at him at what he was doing. Dougie and Eric managed to get to a room, dropped their bags on the carpet and looked at the window. The lads felt they were top of the world. Just on the outskirts is a facility known as Interline, an independent company that formed in 1987, and they mainly produced contraceptives. Since the awareness of AIDS, multiple companies had chipped in to help prevent sexual transmitted diseases, and sales went through the roof, especially for Interline. But by the start of 1994 they had been declined since the pandemic had decreased rapidly, and sorta gained the term prevention fatigue, mainly due to humorous advertising instead of scary ones they started with years before. The lab technicians also had a major obstacle in their way. There was a low supply of latex and materials were starting to get scarce. One of them suggested to return to sheep intestines. They agreed, but since the uprising of veganism and animal rights they couldn't. But one of them, a native to Mallorca, suggested human intestines and knew a friend who worked at a morgue. The others were questionably queasy about this, but they wanted to see if it'll work and proceeded to. The result turned out fine and were pleased by this. The new stock was ready to be sold to the public. Louisa was looking through the shelves around the console that was filled with vinyl records that the doctor had curated from his travels around time and space. Louisa questioned him of some of these artists he's collected: Daft Punk, Aphex Twin, Timbuk 3, Constraint and Sankey and Jaquillian. The doctor leered over from the console and explained that Sankey and Jaquillian are a gay Silurian lounge duo that met in the 30th century. Louisa continued searching through the shelves while the doctor was flicking some switches when the TARDIS landed. The doctor checked the scanner, but all it produced was static. He twisted a knob and even slapped the side of the monitor, but nothing. The doctor then persuaded Louisa to have a look outside. She was unsure, and the doctor mentioned about coal miners using canaries. Louisa opened the TARDIS doors and walked out. It was Earth and the temperature was balmy. The doctor walked out and sniffed the air. His behavior completely took a turn and told Louisa to get back in the TARDIS. Louisa asked why. The doctor said they've landed in Magaluf and he despises the place. Nothing but British holidaymakers getting sunburned, drinking cheap hop-filled water, and their rowdy behavior when a woman strolls down the streets. He then goes on about Crete and Ibiza being much superior than this dive. Louisa thought the doctor was stupidly reacting out of character and took a stand. She's staying put in Magaluf. The doctor closed the TARDIS doors and dematerializes. Louisa folded her arms and looked round at the place. The TARDIS then materializes back and the doctor emerged out with a gym bag in hand. He decided to join her even if he can't stand the place. Dougie and Eric hit the Punta Ballena strip, heading to the various bars trying to get with girls, and usually for them they don't succeed. They meet two Scandinavian women and try schmoozing tactics on them at a nearby table. As a result they ended getting whacked by them, leaving Dougie with a busted lip and Eric a small shiner on his left eye. The two arrive at the next bar and headed to the bar. While the bar, Eric notices a middle-aged man in a cream linen suit ranting at the bartender about a pint of lager with no head on it. Eric strolls over and politely gives him a bottle of hooch to try. The doctor took a sip of the hooch and spat it out on the floor, saying it tasted disgusting. Dougie also comes over and introduces themselves. Eric tries to decipher what the doctor actually does, mentioning archaeology, technical things, or did he just work for the National Health Service? The doctor bluntly said they does all those things plus others, which is too long a list. Dougie and Eric think the doctor said these things to make him feel more important and historic to a couple of Netto employees. The doctor turned round and looked at the punters. Some were sitting down and some were dancing. To take that's cover of it only takes a minute. He then sees Louisa chatting with a buffed up man with brown hair and laughing while in conversation. She heads to the bar and introduces the man to the doctor. The doctor looks up and shakes hands. The man was called Maxim and is Russian. Dougie and Eric look on at Maxim and silently moan of people from the Soviet Union being up girls. Maxim leans over to them, which caught Dougie and Eric off guard. The two keep it cool until Eric blurts out stuff involving the Cold War. Maxim laughed at this and said he's one of the nice ones to come out of the country. Louisa tells the doctor she's going with Maxime for the night and the doctor allows her to. Dougie and Eric look on at Maxime and Louisa, but especially Louisa. They ask the doctor if she was his daughter or niece. The doctor denies this and says Louisa was his assistant. Dougie then mentions if she's his personal assistant and Eric chimes in if she's a patient of his. The doctor was puzzled by the patient thing and Eric mentioned someone the two know from Bolton called Geraldine started seeing her physiotherapist Dr. Wrigley and even going abroad together, which made conversation around the town. The doctor gave a blank expression and mentioned that Louisa was a model he picked up. Well, accidentally picked up, hence why they travel together. Dougie butts in and says he's definitely found a perfect shag. The doctor quickly stood from his stool and glazed at the two. Both of them panically and said it was a joke. The doctor knew that, but sometimes his quick reactions can scare people easily. Eric asked if he's been on Magaluf before and the doctor replies with yes, but only once. Dougie put his arm over the doctor's shoulder and said he and Eric will show him what Magaluf has to offer. The doctor begrudgingly agrees to this. Louisa headed back with Maxime to his hotel room. Louisa headed to the bed and stripped off. Maxime was in bathroom prepping himself. He put on one of the interline condoms and looked himself in the mirror, feeling good for himself. He walked to the bed and Louisa looked at his cock. She asked why he's wearing a rubber and Maxime said it's protection. Louisa jokingly said about having a rubber finger inserted in her cooch, but Maxime was being serious and trying imply safe sex was the way to go. He didn't want contract diseases like HIV and Louisa retorted, thinking it was a myth to scare gay men from having sex. Maxime reassured her and still has his heart for her, but he has to wear one when having intercourse. Louisa gives into this and pulls him in a headlock onto her. It was a strange experience of Louisa. Having something rubbery in her felt off-putting at first, but she became acceptable it and Maxime's good looks made it easy for her to take her mind off it. Maxime then began to make wriggles like he was getting uncomfortable. Louisa asked him if everything down there was okay and Maxime tried to shrug it off. Suddenly he removed himself of her and stood next to the bedside. Then started to scream and blood started to drip from his testicles. Louisa was shocked by this and Maxime tried to take the condom off, but his erected penis started to violently move sideways and quickly ripped off from his body. Louisa screamed and Maxime collapsed to the floor bleeding rapidly. Louisa leaped out of bed and tended to Maxime. He lost quite a lot of blood and became unconsciousness. Louisa quickly put her underwear on along with a buttoned shirt. She saw Maxime's penis crawling around the room like a caterpillar high on caffeine and she raced out the door heading to the hotel lobby in panic. The doctor, Dougie and Eric were walking back to hotel after being at various nightclubs. The doctor was straight. He had a couple of glow stick bracelets on his jacket's wrists and was eating a doner kebab. Dougie and Eric on the other hand were absolutely plastered. Dougie blamed the shots of tequila for starting it all and Eric was gleefully happy, only ended up hugging a lamppost in his plastered state. They reached the hotel and the doctor noticed an ambulance parked outside the entrance. They walk in and noticed Louisa was sitting in the lobby. The doctor came over and asked what happened. Louisa was a bit tearful but mentioned that something had ripped Maxime's penis off and killed him. She also mentioned the penis was crawling around the hotel room's floor and the doctor quickly headed upstairs to Maxime's room. Dougie and Eric were occupied in the lobby because Eric decided to throw up in a nearby plant pot. The doctor and Louisa approached Maxime's room, which was covered in tape. The doctor sneaked in and observed the room. Louisa followed in, still shaken, and looked around. The doctor surveyed the bed and then bathroom. By the sink the doctor found the condom packet and checked the name interline. He smelled it. Nothing sinister or deadly in the packet. He did notice the smell wasn't latex but odor that seemed bodily organic and thinks this interline company have created a new batch made of intestines. Suddenly Louisa let out a scream and the doctor came back to the room where the crawling penis emerged. The doctor raced to a nearby cleaning trolley, picked up a pair of yellow rubber gloves and returned back to the room to catch it. He did eventually caught it and squeezed it to death with his gloved hands. The doctor then set himself to examine it. The condom was stuck on tightly to the foreskin and when removing it the skin of the shaft started to peel off. The penis slightly jutted in places and the doctor managed to get it off. The doctor explained to Louisa that this condom is made of intestines but not sheep intestines as they used to make them but human intestines, and Louisa gave a baffling response to this. The doctor pointed to the penis and says that these condoms somehow have a power to make these sex organs sentient, perhaps through sexual intercourse that ignites them to become sentient. Louisa looked at the condom packet and looked at the company's name and suggests they should investigate. The doctor agrees and Louisa needed to get dressed before they go. The two reach the hotel entrance only to get stopped in their tracks by the local police who ask Louisa to go with to the station for questioning, and Louisa at first refuses as she didn't do anything wrong but realizes they'll need her alibi, so she accepts. The doctor watches Louisa head into the back of the car and waves at her as she goes off. The doctor now must solve this all on his own, and conveniently the condom packet had her address on the packaging so he knew where to go. The doctor managed to find the Interline building. The place had security cameras around it and the doctor managed to sabotage them by using the sonic screwdriver. The doctor heads in while the person at the reception was asleep at the desk. Meanwhile, various couples were drunkenly getting together on the Punta Ballena Strip and returning to their hotels. All of the men were prepping to have their go at intercourse, and just like Maxime, all hell breaks loose. Women were screaming and running. The hotel staff were aghast by the sight of penises crawling through the corridors and making their way onto the streets. While this was happening, Louisa was being interviewed about Maxime's death and one of the officers believes she killed him. Louisa furiously denies this and said she never laid a finger on him other than having sex with him. The interview carried on for a further 10 minutes and in the end they finished. Louisa was put in a police cell for the time being and wondered what will happen next to her. Then she started hearing the radios mentioning human genitalia crawling around the Punta Ballena Strip and realized that a sentient invasion was beginning. The doctor walks into the lab and encounters the group of technicians who were responsible for the sentient sex organ uprising. He berates them for playing God and messing with human nature. One of the technicians, Ruiz, tried to make him leave for his outright misconceptions, but the doctor refused to go, knowing what these people have done. The doctor then found a television set and turned it on, showing the technicians what they've produced. They saw in shock as a news reporter was getting circled by sentient pennies wrapped in condoms and women in underwear leaving the hotel covered in blood. The doctor had shown them what they've created and that it's killing the people using them. He also asks why human intestines. One of the other technicians, Castillo, said they were running out of resources due to changing events including veganism and lack of latex. The doctor didn't buy this and Ruiz chimed in saying it was his idea to use human intestines from the local morgue. The doctor's attitude became more furious and called Ruiz a sick bastard for using human organs for contraceptives. The doctor made the technicians go to the building and lock the doors with the sonic screwdriver. The doctor, in act of desperation to solve this uprising, makes the decision to blow up the building and that none of these condoms will ever be produced again. He sabotaged the electrics and found various flammable liquids. He reached for his box of matches and lights a couple to throw around the lab. Once flames erupted, the doctor escapes from one of the fire exits and hides on the outskirts of the building. He watches as the emergency services arrive. Firefighters extinguished the blaze and the lab technicians were questioned by the police. The doctor sneakily walked off into the darkness, leaving the destruction behind. Morning had broken and the Punta Ballena Strip was quiet. The local authorities were picking up the dead sentient penises and putting them in plastic yellow bags to bin. The doctor was outside the TARDIS looking at the sea. Dougie and Eric came up behind and asked how his night in Magaluf went. The doctor said it was eventful. Dougie looked around at the street thinking there must have been an outbreak of food poisoning, and Eric gladly thought he didn't eat anything at night. He also said to the doctor that he must have had some serious diarrhea after that doner kebab he'd eaten, and the doctor just replied with a grunt. Dougie and Eric bid farewell to the doctor as the two have some catching up. The doctor mentioned those two Scandinavian women they were trying to court and Dougie and Eric laughed at it. They still had a few tricks up their sleeves and the doctor just smirked. The doctor looked at the local paper and one of the headlines mentions to the technicians were responsible for the holidaymakers' deaths as the result of creating condoms that somehow come alive and rip off from their genitals. The doctor had brought them to justice. Unpredictable decisions only to keep a company going and all to do with profit. The doctor then saw Louisa heading towards him. She was running and her arms were open. The doctor brought his arms out ready for what he expects. Louisa hugged him tightly. She was still tearful and shaken after last night. She said solitary confinement was tough and hard to take in. The doctor comforted her and kindly brought her in the TARDIS. She sat in the armchair next to the console. She told the doctor that Maxime was a really nice guy and that there might have been a connection if wasn't cut short. The doctor leaned against the console and said something about certain moments can be wonderful but don't last for the right or the wrong reasons. Louisa went on about their previous adventures and the people she encountered that she would have stayed with, but their ties were cut short. She rambled on about Krieg, Ivanov and Darren. The doctor then put his arm around her. He says when anyone travels with him they reach a point that they can't continue either through emotional trauma from previous events or they have a reason to stay behind somewhere if they proved their point to become independent. He thinks she's going to for the obvious one. She'd through a lot on his travels and thought it was time to let go. The doctor tells her that he can take her back to 1979 and she live her normal life finding her place in the world. Louisa then slowly walked to the doors. She hesitated and then walked back to the doctor. She says she enjoys traveling with him, visiting places she couldn't dream of and having someone who's unpredictable but wise with her makes it feel exciting for most of it. The doctor brought out a smile and Louisa gave him a kiss on the cheek. She sat back on the armchair and asks the doctor where is their next destination. The doctor said some coordinates and replied back to her saying he wasn't sure. But that's the exiting part.